Walk down a few stone steps behind an Amish farmhouse in Holmes County, Ohio. Push open a thick wooden door set into the side of a low hill and step into a room that has no electricity running to it at all. It is the middle of January. Outside, the wind is brutal, but inside this room it is cool and damp and still, and the wooden shelves are stacked with the entire harvest of last summer. Crates of carrots and beets packed in sand, bins of potatoes and onions, heads of cabbage, baskets of apples, rows of canned tomatoes, and beans catching the dim light. There's enough food in this one earthen room to feed a large family straight through to spring, and not 1 watt of power is keeping it fresh. This room cost almost nothing to build. The Amish have kept their food this way for 200 years, and the appliance industry was very glad to see the rest of America forget it was possible. After my video on the water pump that runs without electricity, a lot of you asked the obvious next question: what about the refrigerator? What did people do before there was a humming box in every kitchen, and what happens to all that food when the power goes out for a week? So I went back to Holmes County to see how a family with no electric bill keeps a winter's worth of food from spoiling. And the answer is a room dug into the ground that uses the exact same free energy we have talked about before, the steady, unchanging temperature of the earth itself. If you are the kind of person who believes practical knowledge gets quietly pushed aside to protect somebody's profit, then you already know what to do. Subscribe, because there is more of this every single week. Here's the idea the whole thing rests on, and you have felt it yourself if you have ever walked into a basement on a hot day. Go down below the frost line a few feet, into the earth, and the ground holds a steady temperature all year long, somewhere in the low to mid-50s in most of the country. It does not spike in summer. It does not crash in winter. The soil is simply too heavy and too deep to swing with the weather above it. A root cellar is nothing, more than a room built down in that stable earth, borrowing its temperature for free, every hour of every day, forever. But temperature is only the first of 3 things that keep food alive down there, and this is the part most people never understood, the part that makes the difference between food that lasts a week and food that lasts until spring. The first is that cool temperature, because cold slows everything down. A fruit or vegetable is still alive after you pick it. It is still breathing, still using itself up. Every 18 degrees you drop the temperature roughly cuts that process in half, which is why a cool cellar can double or triple how long your harvest keeps. The second is humidity, and this is the one that trips people up. Your kitchen refrigerator is bone dry, which is why a carrot in the crisper goes limp and rubbery in a week. A root cellar is the opposite. The earthen floor and walls hold the air at 85 to 95% humidity, almost like a cool, damp autumn day. And in that moist air, a carrot or a beet stays firm and crisp for months. The third is ventilation, and it is the piece almost everyone forgets. Stored produce keeps breathing, giving off a little warmth, some moisture, and a gas called ethylene that speeds up ripening. A good cellar has 2 vents, one low to let cool air in and one high to let that stale air and gas escape, so the room breathes slowly and the food does not rot in its own fumes. Temperature, humidity, ventilation. Get those 3 right, and the earth does the rest. And the Amish did not. Learn these 3 rules from a book. They learned them the way they learn everything, by watching what worked and passing it down. A grandmother knew, without ever reading a number, that the carrots went into damp sand and the onions hung dry by the door. She knew the apples had to sit apart from the potatoes, though. She might have called it nothing more than common sense. That knowledge was old, long before it ever reached Ohio. Families across northern Europe dug cold rooms into hillsides for centuries. Farmers in the old country buried barrels of vegetables below the frost and dug them up sweet in spring. Every cold land on earth arrived at the same answer, because the problem was always the same: how to carry the abundance of summer across a long, hard winter without losing it. The Amish carried that answer across the ocean and simply never set it down, while the rest of the country slowly forgot it had ever known. Quick question before we go on, and I genuinely want to know: did your parents or your grandparents ever keep a cellar, a cold room, or even a corner of an unheated basement where the potatoes and the canning went for winter? Drop a comment with your state and tell me. I read every single one, and these old family memories are exactly what I want to hear. And if you have made it this far, subscribe, because what comes next is the part the appliance industry would much rather you never put together. Now, back to it. So if a room in the ground can do most of what a refrigerator does, with no power and almost no cost, why did it vanish from nearly every American home? You already know the shape of the answer. When the electric refrigerator arrived in the early 20th century, it was a genuine wonder, and nobody's going to tell you to throw yours out. But it came with a quiet cost that nobody advertised. It tied your food to the power company. The moment the grid goes down, the clock starts ticking on everything in that box. And it created a steady business because a refrigerator runs every hour of every day. It shows up on your power bill every month, and every 10 or 15 years it breaks and you buy another one. A room dug into the ground does none of that. It has no motor, no compressor, no bill, and nothing to replace. From the point of view of an industry that sells appliances and an industry that sells the power to run them, that is not progress. That is a customer lost. So the root cellar was never banned. It just quietly stopped being built. New houses came with a slab instead of a cellar. Kitchens came with a gleaming new appliance. And within a couple of generations, a skill that nearly every rural family in America once had simply faded out of memory. The Amish kept it for the same reason they keep everything. They never handed control of their food over to a company they could not see. But the proof that it works is sitting under old farmhouses all across this country, and in the practice of homesteaders who have brought it roaring back. A well-built root cellar can hold 500 to 1,000 pounds of food through an entire winter with no electricity. People who rediscover it are stunned that produce they used to lose in a week now keeps until spring. This is not nostalgia. It is food security you can dig with a shovel. And after a few long power outages in recent years, a lot of families are remembering exactly why their grandparents had one. Now here is the part I promised you, and if you already own your home and you do not have a hillside to tunnel into, stay with me, because this next part is built specifically for you. You do not need to dig a cave. You almost certainly already have the beginnings of a root cellar, and it is in your basement. The corner of a basement on the north or east side of the house against the foundation walls that touch the cool earth, away from the furnace and the water heater, is naturally the coolest part of your home. Wall off that corner, insulate the side that faces the warm house so the cellar stays cool, at one low vent and one high vent to the outside for that slow breathing, and you have a working cold room for a few weekends of effort and very little money. From there, it is simple. Pack carrots and beets in boxes of damp sand to hold in their moisture. Keep potatoes in the dark because light turns them green, and never let them freeze. Keep your onions and garlic separate and drier because they want the opposite of what a carrot wants. And keep your apples well away from your potatoes, because apples give off that ripening gas and will sprout your potatoes weeks early. Put a simple thermometer and a humidity gauge on the shelf and let the earth do the work. Now I owe you one honest, careful word because food is involved and I take that seriously. A root cellar slows down fresh produce. It is not a magic box and it does not make spoiled food safe. Check your stores often, and the moment one potato or one apple starts to rot, pull it out because a single bad one will spoil the whole crate. A root cellar is also not a substitute for proper canning or freezing when it comes to anything that can make you sick, like meat or low-acid foods. Use it for what it is brilliant at, the roots, the squash, the apples, the cabbage, the home-canned jars, and when something looks or smells wrong, throw it out without a second thought. Done sensibly, it is one of the safest and oldest forms of food storage there is. And let me put the value in plain numbers because it surprised even me. A modern refrigerator draws power every hour of every day and adds up to real money on your bill across a year, year after year for as long as you own it. A root cellar draws nothing, ever. Build it once, and it works for 100 years, the way that Amish cellar has. And on top of that, it holds far more than a refrigerator ever could, hundreds of pounds of food at a time, which means you can buy in bulk in the fall or grow your own and carry it through the lean months for almost nothing. It is not just cheaper than the box in your kitchen. It does a job the box was never big enough to do. Everything I have covered about Amish self-reliance, the cellar, the water, the cooling, the heat, I've put together in one place in the description if you want it. But stay right here because the ending is the part that matters. And now the piece I held back, the thing that made me stand in that cool, dark room a long time after I had seen everything. The Amish grandmother who showed me her cellar told me it was dug by her husband's grandfather, by hand, into the side of the hill before the farmhouse above it was even finished. 5 generations of one family have walked down those same stone steps with the summer harvest in their arms and walked back up through the winter with food to put on the table. She showed me jars her own mother had filled, on shelves her grandfather had built, in a room the earth has kept at the same cool temperature for over 100 years. She set a basket of apples on the shelf and said the thing I keep coming back to. She said, "The English think fresh food comes from a store in the winter. We have always known it comes from the summer if you only know how to keep it. That is the whole thing, right there. The earth was always cool down below. The harvest was always there to be kept. The skill of holding it through the winter was worked out over thousands of years, and then it was quietly traded away for a humming box and a monthly bill. But the ground does not spoil your food, and it does not send an invoice. The knowledge was never lost. You were just never given it, and now you have it. So tell me, drop your state in the comments and tell me whether your family ever kept a cellar or a cold room and what they stored in it. And if your grandmother ever sent you down to the cellar to fetch potatoes or a jar of something she put up in the fall, I want to hear about it. Because that cellar and this room are the very same physics, just under a different name. I read every single one. Hit subscribe, because next week I'm going to show you why the Amish have never once replaced a wooden fence in 200 years, and the $2 treatment they brush onto the wood that makes it outlast pressure-treated lumber, a method the lumber industry has no reason to ever tell you about. The reason it works is a story you are going to want to hear.